Abandoned puppy in a freezing barn. You won't believe who saved it. The night was merciless. The wind howled like a wounded beast, rattling the fragile wooden walls of an old, forgotten barn on the outskirts of a desolate farmland. Snowflakes swirled wildly, coating the ground in an icy, unforgiving blanket. The barn, once a shelter for farm animals, now stood as a hollow relic of the past. Its roof sagging, its wooden planks creaking under the weight of winter's fury. Inside, the air was thick with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional whistle of the wind slipping through the cracks. But beneath the heavy stillness, hidden in the corner where the straw was sparse and damp, was a faint sound, a whimper. Weak, almost swallowed by the roar of the storm, but it was there. A tiny, trembling creature lay curled up in a shivering ball. A puppy, no more than a few weeks old, abandoned in the unforgiving cold. No one knew how long it had been there. Its small body was barely visible against the shadows, its fur matted with frost, its breath shallow. The puppy's ribs were faintly visible beneath its soft coat, a clear sign that it had gone days without food. Its eyes, once bright and curious, now flickered with exhaustion and fear. It had once belonged to someone. Maybe it had been born in a home, nuzzled against its mother and siblings. Maybe warm hands had once held it, promising love and safety. But all of that was gone now. Had it been abandoned intentionally? Cast away like something worthless? Or had it simply wandered too far, lost and forgotten? The answers didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the present, the relentless cold tightening its grip, slowly draining the little life that remained. The puppy whimpered softly, but there was no one to hear. No comforting hand, no familiar scent, no warmth to chase away the bitter night. It tried to move, but its tiny legs wobbled, too weak to support its fragile frame. The barn was its only shield from the storm, but it was no true refuge. The wind still found its way in, creeping through every gap and crack, whispering the cruel reality of its situation. If help didn't come soon, the puppy would not see the morning. The night deepened, and so did the cold. Every hour that passed was another battle for survival, another test the puppy was not prepared to fight. Its body had already started shutting down, using whatever little energy remained to keep its heart beating. It pressed itself into the damp straw, searching for warmth that didn't exist. Each breath it took felt heavier, slower. Hunger gnawed at its belly, but even that pain was fading, replaced by an eerie numbness that spread through its limbs. The storm outside raged on, indifferent to the tiny soul trapped within the barn's decaying walls. Snow piled up against the door, sealing it in, as if nature itself had decided this would be the puppy's final resting place. But then something stirred, a sound, presence. The puppy's ears, though numb with frost, twitched ever so slightly. Had it imagined it? Was it just the wind playing tricks? No. Something or someone was approaching the barn. A pair of footsteps crunched against the snow, drawing closer. The storm had hidden the world away in darkness, but in that moment, hope flickered where there had been none before. The abandoned puppy was no longer alone. The storm outside raged on, its icy winds howling through the night like a relentless predator searching for its next victim. The barn, though offering some form of shelter, was far from safe. It stood in isolation, its wooden walls worn and weathered, barely holding together under the brutal assault of the freezing wind. Snow had already begun to seep through the cracks, forming small piles on the frozen ground. Inside, the air was thick with silence, save for the occasional creaking of the beams above. Nestled in a corner, barely visible against the straw-covered floor, was a tiny, shivering figure. The puppy, abandoned and alone, had curled into itself, its frail body trembling violently as it fought against the cold. Its fur, which once might have been soft and warm, was now stiff with frost. Every breath it took came out in a weak, misty puff, disappearing into the cold void around it. The barn, instead of being a place of refuge, had turned into a death trap. The wooden doors, heavy with snow pressing against them from the outside, were sealed shut. Even if the puppy had the strength to move, there was nowhere to go. The night outside was merciless, and the temperature inside was dropping rapidly. Each passing moment drained the life from its tiny body, making it harder to stay awake, harder to fight. It hadn't eaten in days. Hunger clawed at its belly, but even that pain was slowly being replaced by a deeper, more dangerous numbness. Its little paws, once eager to explore and play, now felt like frozen stones, unresponsive to its silent pleas to move. The cold had reached its bones. The puppy's heartbeat, once steady and strong, was slowing. It was losing the battle. Then, something shifted in the darkness. A noise, faint at first, almost imperceptible against the raging storm outside. A soft rustling, followed by the faintest crunch of footsteps against the frozen ground. The puppy's ears twitched, though barely. Was it just the wind? Or was something else lurking in the shadows? The barn had been abandoned for years, but that didn't mean it was truly empty. As the hours dragged on, the puppy's condition worsened. The shivering that had once racked its tiny frame was beginning to slow. At first it had fought to stay warm, fought to stay awake, fought to survive. But the battle was becoming too much. Every breath felt heavier, every heartbeat fainter. It no longer felt the cold as sharply as before. Instead, a strange, eerie warmth was beginning to settle in. A dangerous trick played by the body when it's on the verge of shutting down. It was slipping away, sinking into a quiet stillness that felt almost peaceful. The sounds of the storm outside grew distant, muffled, as if the world itself was fading. The puppy's eyes, half-lidded and clouded with exhaustion, stared blankly into the darkness. Was this how it ended? Forgotten? Alone? Lost in the frozen void? Its tiny chest rose and fell in slow, uneven breaths, each one weaker than the last. And then something changed. The faint rustling in the shadows grew louder. The barn door, which had seemed permanently sealed by the storm, groaned against the force of something pressing against it from the outside. The latch rattled. Snow tumbled down from where it had been packed against the frame. Then, with one final push, the door creaked open. A rush of icy wind swept into the barn, carrying with it the scent of something unfamiliar. A figure stood in the doorway, its silhouette barely visible against the swirling snow outside. The puppy, too weak to react, barely registered the presence. Hope had arrived. But who or what had found the abandoned puppy? And would it be in time to save its life? The night was merciless, the wind cutting through the air like invisible knives. Snowflakes danced violently, obscuring everything beyond a few feet. No living soul should have been outside in such a blizzard, especially not near this long-abandoned barn, miles away from civilization. Yet, amidst the relentless storm, something moved. At first, it was just a shadow against the swirling snow, barely distinguishable from the storm itself. Then came the soft but deliberate sound of footsteps crunching through ice and frost, steady and determined. They weren't human steps, too light, too rhythmic. It was the sound of padded feet, ones that belonged to something used to braving the wilderness. Through the darkness, a pair of sharp eyes gleamed. They scanned the frozen ground, searching for something unseen. The figure moved carefully, as if following a scent, its body low, ears twitching, sensing something ahead. Closer. The old barn loomed before it, standing like a forgotten relic in the snow-covered landscape. The figure hesitated for just a moment before pushing forward. It didn't stumble or lose its way. It knew where it was going. Inside, the abandoned puppy was slipping into unconsciousness. Its fragile body had long given up shivering, the cold numbing its senses entirely. The world around it was nothing but a haze of darkness, a void of silence swallowing it whole. Even as the barn door creaked slightly from the storm's force, the puppy did not react. It was too far gone. But the footsteps outside did not stop. They grew closer, more confident. Then, with a burst of force, something pushed against the snow-packed entrance. The weight of the storm had sealed the barn shut, but that didn't matter. A determined shove. Then another. The wooden door groaned against the strain. And finally it gave way. A gust of icy wind tore through the barn as the door was forced open, carrying with it a flurry of snow. For a moment, all was chaos. Wind, frost, and darkness swirling together. But then, through the haze, a figure emerged. It wasn't a person. It wasn't a lost traveler or a farmer returning home. It was a dog. A large, thick-coated canine, its fur dusted with frost and snowflakes clinging to its powerful frame. Its coat was a mix of deep browns and grays, wild and rugged, built to endure the cruelest of winters. But its eyes, piercing, intelligent, and filled with an unshakable purpose, held no trace of fear. It stepped inside cautiously, shaking the ice from its fur before sniffing the frigid air. It had followed a scent here, a scent of weakness, of desperation. A scent that told it something small, something helpless, was close by. The dog's ears perked as it scanned the dimly lit barn. And then it saw it. A tiny, nearly lifeless form curled in a pile of frozen straw. The puppy's fur was matted with ice, its breathing so faint it could barely be detected. It was nothing more than a fragile whisper of life against the merciless cold. But the big dog didn't hesitate. It approached each step careful yet sure. When it reached the puppy's side, it lowered its nose, sniffing gently. A deep, low rumble escaped from its chest. Not a growl, but a sound of recognition, of understanding. This wasn't just another lost creature. This was something that needed saving. The puppy stirred ever so slightly, its weak body barely able to respond. Its tiny eyes fluttered open for a fraction of a second before closing again. It was too weak to react, too cold to even process what was happening. But the big dog didn't need a response. It knew what to do. Carefully, the dog circled around the frozen puppy and then, with the gentlest of movements, it lowered itself beside the frail creature. Its thick fur pressed against the puppy's frozen body, sharing its warmth. Its heavy tail curled protectively around the little one, shielding it from the brutal wind that still slipped through the barn's broken walls. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the puppy felt something other than cold. Felt warmth. Felt a presence, strong, steady, safe. The big dog nudged the puppy closer with its snout, urging it to move, to react, to fight for life. At first, the puppy remained still, its body too exhausted to respond. But then, something inside it flickered. A tiny, desperate instinct, the will to survive. With great effort, the puppy shifted ever so slightly, pressing itself against the warmth of its savior. A tiny, broken whimper escaped from its throat, barely audible, but it was enough. The big dog let out another deep rumbling sound, reassuring, protective. As the minutes passed, the puppy's breathing grew just a little stronger. The warmth of the big dog's body seeped into its frozen limbs, chasing away the deadly chill that had nearly claimed it. It was still weak, still dangerously close to the edge, but for the first time that night, there was hope. The storm outside raged on, the wind wailing through the empty fields. But inside the barn, something had changed. The abandoned puppy was no longer alone. But the question remained, where had this mysterious dog come from? And was help truly on the way? Or would the two of them have to find their own way out of the storm together? The icy wind howled through the abandoned barn, rattling the broken wooden planks as if warning of the danger outside. But inside, the puppy wasn't safe either. The bitter cold had already sunk into its tiny body, its shivers growing weaker with every passing minute. It needed warmth, food, life. But who would help an abandoned creature in the dead of night, in the middle of nowhere? The answer came in the form of the mysterious figure that had appeared in the barn. The big dog, covered in a thick coat of fur, its eyes filled with intelligence and determination. The puppy, too weak to even lift its head, felt the warmth of the stranger as it curled around its tiny body. It was a silent promise. You are not alone anymore. But the barn was no place to stay. The dog knew this. The snowstorm outside was only getting worse, and if they remained here, the puppy wouldn't survive until morning. The big dog made its decision. With careful jaws, it picked up the tiny, fragile pup by the scruff of its neck. The puppy let out a weak whimper, but there was no struggle. It trusted this unexpected rescuer. Stepping over the piles of straw and broken beams, the big dog made its way toward the exit. Pushing through the barn door, it stepped out into the raging storm, carrying the puppy carefully as it braved the cold. Every step was a battle against the elements. The snow was deep, the wind cutting like a blade against the big dog's face. But it pushed forward, undeterred. It had to be strong, not for itself, but for the tiny life depending on it. Through the thick snowfall, a warm glow flickered in the distance. A cabin, standing strong against the storm. The dog knew this place. It had been here before. This was where safety could be found. The journey felt endless, but finally, the dog reached the wooden steps of the cabin's porch. Climbing up, it stopped at the door, sniffing the familiar scent of the man who lived inside. With a determined nudge of its nose, the dog pushed the door open just enough to step inside. The warmth hit instantly. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, sending waves of comforting heat into the room. The scent of burning wood filled the air, mixing with something familiar, the scent of safety. The big dog moved toward the fire, carefully setting the puppy down onto the wooden floor. The tiny creature barely moved, its body stiff from the cold. Then, footsteps approached. A man, weathered by years of life in the wilderness, stood frozen for a moment, his eyes wide with disbelief as he took in the sight before him. A large, snow-covered dog stood in his doorway, and before it, a tiny, frozen puppy lay motionless. Without hesitation, the man knelt down, scooping the puppy up into his arms. Its fur was damp, its tiny body barely registering warmth, but there was still life, faint, fragile but present. The big dog watched closely, its deep eyes locked onto the man's every movement. It had brought the puppy here for a reason. Now it was up to this human to help. The man wrapped the puppy in a thick wool blanket, carrying it closer to the fire. His rough hands, careful and gentle, rubbed at the tiny body, trying to bring back warmth. For long, silent moments, he worked, glancing at the big dog as if searching for an answer. "You brought it here," he murmured, his voice filled with awe. "You saved it." The dog didn't move, its protective gaze never leaving the puppy. Then a tiny sound, a whimper. The puppy stirred, its small body shifting under the warmth of the blanket. Its paws twitched, and a moment later, its eyes fluttered open just enough to see the man holding it. Relief flooded the room. The big dog let out a quiet, satisfied breath. The puppy was safe now. As the storm continued to rage outside, inside the cabin, something extraordinary was happening. The man placed a small bowl of milk near the fire, carefully feeding the puppy drop by drop until it found the strength to swallow. Slowly, the warmth seeped back into its body, replacing the numbness of the cold. The big dog, still watching closely, finally lay down beside the fire, its body relaxing for the first time that night. But its eyes never left the tiny creature it had saved. As the hours passed, the puppy grew stronger. It curled deeper into the warmth of the blanket, but this time, its breathing was steady. Its life, once hanging by a thread, had been given another chance. The man looked at the big dog, admiration filling his expression. "You wouldn't leave it behind," he whispered. "You knew it needed help." The dog didn't respond in words, but it didn't have to. Its actions had already spoken louder than any words ever could. That night, in the warmth of the cabin, an unbreakable bond was formed. The big dog had chosen to save the puppy. The man had chosen to help them both. And now, they weren't just strangers brought together by fate. They were family. As the warmth of the fire filled the cabin, the man sat beside the small bundle of fur, watching over the fragile creature that had nearly been lost to the cold. The puppy, though still weak, stirred slightly, its tiny body now wrapped securely in a thick wool blanket. It was safe. But one question haunted the man's mind. Why had this helpless pup been left alone in such brutal conditions? His weathered hands gently stroked the puppy's fur, feeling the thinness of its frame, the bones barely covered by flesh. This wasn't just an accident. This puppy had been abandoned long before the storm rolled in. The big dog, lying silently by the fire, lifted its head, its deep eyes locking onto the man's. There was intelligence in that gaze, an understanding far beyond what most would expect from an animal. It had brought the puppy here for a reason. The man sighed, shaking his head. He had lived in these woods for years, seen the cruelty of people who discarded animals as if they were nothing more than objects. Perhaps the puppy had been part of a litter, the weakest one, tossed aside because it was seen as a burden. Or maybe it had wandered too far, lost and forgotten. Either way, it didn't matter now. The puppy had been given a second chance. His gaze shifted back to the big dog. This was no ordinary stray. There was something almost noble about the way it carried itself, something that spoke of a past filled with loyalty and purpose. The man leaned forward, studying the dog more closely. Its thick fur was tangled in places, but beneath the rough exterior, he could see the signs. This dog had once belonged to someone. A faint mark around its neck hinted at a collar that had long since been removed or broken away. "Where did you come from?" the man murmured. The dog didn't flinch. It simply watched him, calm and patient, as if waiting for him to figure it out. Then something clicked. He had heard stories from the townsfolk about a dog that roamed these woods, a guardian of sorts. Some claimed it had once been a working dog, trained to protect and rescue. Others believed it had been abandoned by its owner years ago, left to fend for itself. But despite its solitary existence, it had been seen time and time again leading lost hikers to safety, chasing away predators, even guiding injured animals toward human help. Could it be? A chill ran down the man's spine, not from fear but from awe. This wasn't just any dog. It was a rescuer, a protector, and tonight it had chosen to save a life once again. The man reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against the dog's thick fur. "You knew it needed help," he whispered. "That's why you brought it here." The dog blinked, then let out a deep breath before resting its head on its paws. It had done its duty. Now it would wait and watch, making sure the puppy continued to grow stronger. The truth was undeniable now. The puppy had been abandoned, left to perish in the cold. But fate had other plans. Because the guardian of the forest, the forgotten protector, had found it first. As the days passed, the once fragile puppy began to regain its strength. No longer shivering and helpless, it would now wag its tiny tail when the man came near, its once dull eyes shining with newfound life. It wasn't just surviving anymore, it was living. The man, who had once lived alone in the quiet solitude of the wilderness, found himself forming an unexpected bond with the little pup. Every morning, he would set out fresh food and water, ensuring it had everything it needed to grow strong. At night, the puppy no longer slept in fear of the cold, but curled up by the fireplace, safe and warm. But what about the big dog? It watched over the cabin from a distance, never venturing too far yet never claiming a place inside. It had done its job, rescued the helpless, ensured safety, but now it stood at a crossroads. Would it stay or disappear back into the wild, continuing its solitary path? One evening, as the man stood on his porch, the little puppy at his feet, he glanced toward the treeline. The big dog sat there, watching as it always did. "You don't have to leave," the man said softly, his voice carrying in the cold evening air. For the first time, the dog hesitated. It looked at the small pup, now full of energy, playing by the man's side. It had brought the puppy here to be saved. And in a way, it had saved the man, too, reminding him of what it meant to care, to love, to share his life with another. The big dog took a slow step forward. Then another. The man smiled, stepping aside to let it in. That night, the cabin wasn't just a shelter. It was a home. A home for three souls who had once been alone but had now found one another. Word spread quickly through the nearby town. The man, who rarely had visitors, was now known for taking in not one, but two remarkable dogs. The story of how the big dog had saved the abandoned puppy became something of a legend, one that people told with awe and admiration. Some came to see the guardian of the woods themselves, but the big dog, true to its nature, remained humble, never seeking attention or recognition. It was never about fame, it had simply done what was right. The puppy, now stronger and healthier, never strayed far from its rescuer. It followed the big dog everywhere, mimicking its movements, learning from it. In time, the little one grew into a strong, confident dog, a reflection of the hero that had saved it. The big dog had given it more than just a second chance. It had given it a purpose, a family, a place where it belonged. As the fire crackled in the hearth one quiet evening, the man sat with his two loyal companions by his side. He ran his fingers through their fur, lost in thought. He had lived alone for so long, convinced that his days of companionship were over. But life had a way of surprising even the most hardened hearts. A helpless puppy, abandoned and left to perish, had found salvation in the most unexpected of ways. And the big dog, the silent guardian, had proven that true kindness knows no boundaries, no limits. Sometimes heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they walk on four legs through the snow, braving the cold for the sake of another. And sometimes, fate brings the right souls together at just the right moment, creating a story that will never be forgotten. This heartwarming story reminds us that kindness and compassion can come from the most unexpected places. What did you think about the incredible bond between the big dog and the abandoned puppy? Have you ever witnessed an animal showing such selfless bravery? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your opinions and stories in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more incredible tales of animal heroism. Remember, there are countless animals out there who need a second chance. If you ever come across an animal in need, be the hero they're waiting for. Even the smallest act of kindness can change a life forever.